Have you ever been humiliated in front of a room full of people and still forced yourself to smile like it didn't break something inside you? Tell me in the comments what city you're listening from. And if you like stories with hard twists and clean revenge, hit like and subscribe, because the turn that's coming is not what you think. Serena's forehead rests against the tinted glass, her breath coming in short, uneven pulls. Inside the black sedan, her fists thud softly against the leather, but the sound dies inside the soundproof cabin. Outside, the ballroom glows in the distance, chandeliers sparkling like that world belongs to someone else, a world where her name doesn't even exist. Minutes ago, Marcus had shouted across the room, "Your appearance disgraces my family. Go wait in the car," and the security team moved fast, gripping her arms and steering her out like she was a disturbance, not a wife. Her throat burns, tears spill without permission, and she can't make sense of how 10 years of marriage turned cheap in one sentence. Her mind keeps replaying the snapshots she can't unsee. Patricia Thorne's cold expression. The guests' faces shifting from curiosity to entertainment. Phones lifting the second the drama turned public. Marcus's anger not even aimed at the moment itself, but at what it did to his image. Serena sinks back into the seat, the old habit returning, the one that tells her if she makes herself smaller, she'll be safer. If she takes up less space, maybe she'll be noticed less. Maybe she'll be punished less. Then the engine cuts off. The silence becomes heavy, immediate, almost violent. Serena swallows and realizes she isn't alone. In the driver's seat is Mr. James, the older driver who has always moved like a shadow, polite, quiet, invisible. But tonight he isn't invisible. He turns slowly, and in the rearview mirror his eyes meet hers with a steadiness that doesn't belong to an employee taking orders. His voice isn't soft. It's controlled, firm. "Serena, please don't cry." It shocks her so hard her sob catches. She blinks, wipes her cheek with the back of her hand, and pushes out the words through the panic. "Please, just unlock the door. I'll take a bus. I'll call an Uber. Anything." "No," Mr. James says, simple and final. He reaches to the console and pulls out a tablet like he's been waiting for this exact moment. "We're not going anywhere until you understand the truth." He angles the screen toward her. An official-looking registry document fills it, clean lines and formal headings. Serena's hands tremble as she takes it, the words swimming for a second as her vision blurs. Then one line snaps into focus so sharply it feels like it cuts her. Her breath stops, she reads it again, and again, as if her eyes might be lying to protect her from the impact. That can't be right," she whispers. "Marcus is the CEO." "CEO is a job," Mr. James replies evenly. "Owner is the truth." He speaks in calm, precise pieces like he's laying down bricks. The contract term has ended. The transfer protocol has been activated. The company is no longer under Marcus Thorne's control. The car she's sitting in belongs to the company. The security outside works for the company, which means, "This car is yours," Mr. James says. "That security detail is yours. The entire company is yours." Serena stares at the ballroom lights through the tinted window, and something inside her shifts. The pain is still there, raw and burning, but a colder clarity slides underneath it. Marcus isn't powerful. He's just loud. He's been wearing borrowed authority like a tailored suit, and tonight he ripped the seam in public. Mr. James holds her gaze in the mirror. "I'm awaiting your instructions," he says, steady as steel. Serena's tears slow, not because she's fine, but because her brain is catching up to what her heart hasn't dared to believe. For the first time tonight, the weight of the situation moves off her chest and into her hands. Decision, control, consequence. Then Mr. James asks the question that makes her pulse spike all over again. "What should we do with your husband?" The sedan felt like a coffin with leather seats. Serena's palms hit the tinted glass again and again until her wrists ached, but the sound died inside the cabin like it was being swallowed. Outside, the valet lane glittered with camera flashes and laughter leaking through the venue doors, like nothing had happened at all. Her throat tightened with that helpless kind of humiliation, the kind that makes you question your own reality. 10 minutes ago, she was a wife in a ballroom. Now she was cargo, shoved into a company car and locked in like a problem Marcus didn't want visible. She forced herself to breathe through the panic. The air inside smelled faintly of clean cologne and expensive upholstery, which somehow made it worse, like even the car was dressed to impress while she was falling apart. Serena wiped at her cheeks, but the mascara kept smeary. Ng, turning her reflection in the dark window into someone she barely recognized. She tried the door handle again out of instinct. Locked. Of course it was. Marcus didn't do mistakes when it came to control. Then, in the rearview mirror, she noticed movement. The driver, Mr. James. She hadn't even clocked him at first because he was always there in the background, silent, steady, part of the Thorne family's furniture. He'd driven Serena to charity lunches, company dinners, and hospital appointments Marcus never attended. He'd heard every sharp comment Patricia threw and every fake apology Marcus offered, and yet he'd never once reacted. This time, he didn't start the car. He didn't check his phone. He didn't do the usual routine. He simply turned the engine off, and the sudden quiet made Serena's sobbing sound too loud, too exposed, even though no one else could hear it. Mr. James turned slightly in his seat, not fully facing her, but enough that his voice carried clearly through the stillness. "Serena," he said, calm and firm, like he was speaking to someone he respected, "please don't cry." The words hit her harder than Marcus's shouting because they didn't sound like pity. They sounded like instruction, like a man who knew something she didn't. Serena stared at him, blinking fast. "Open the door," she managed, voice cracking. "I'll take an Uber, I'll take a bus. I can't go back in there." "No," Mr. James said, gentle but absolute. "You're not going anywhere until you see this." He reached into the center console and pulled out a tablet, then angled it toward her. Serena's hands trembled as she took it, the screen bright against the dim interior. A document was already open, official-looking, neat blocks of text, a header that made her stomach drop before she even understood why. Mr. James pointed once precise, "Read that line." Serena's eyes tracked to the highlighted section. Owner of Thorne Group of Companies, Serena B. Hawthorne. She read it again because her brain refused to accept it. Then a third time, slower, as if the words would rearrange themselves into Marcus's name if she stared hard enough. They didn't. Her name stayed exactly where it was, black text on white, unbothered by her shock. That's not possible," she whispered. "Marcus is the CEO." "Marcus is a manager," Mr. James corrected, voice level, "a hired one." Serena's mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" Mr. James didn't look away. "Your father finalized everything this morning. The trust transfer, the ownership update, the protocol you weren't meant to know existed until the test was finished." Serena felt her pulse thud in her ears. "My dad doesn't have," she started, then stopped, because she heard how small it sounded. How much she'd been trained to believe her father was irrelevant, embarrassing, barely worth mentioning. Mr. James continued like he'd been waiting years for the moment to say it out loud. "Fletcher Bloit has been watching Marcus Thorne for a long time. He wanted to know exactly what kind of man you married. He gave Marcus a title, a salary, and access. He did not give him ownership." Serena's fingers tightened on the tablet. The humiliation from the ballroom didn't disappear, but it shifted, transforming into something colder. Marcus's insults replayed in her head with a new, uglier meaning. The years of "we can't afford it" while he wore tailored suits. The constant control over what she wore, where she went, who she saw. The way Patricia spoke to her like she was a stray Marcus had dragged in for charity. "So he never had it," Serena said, barely audible. "Any of it." "No," Mr. James replied. "And as of midnight, his contract term ended. He doesn't know yet. He thinks he's still in charge because no one else ever told him otherwise." Serena's throat tightened. She looked through the tinted glass at the venue lights, imagining Marcus back in the ballroom, laughing again, pretending he made the mess disappear. She almost laughed herself, but it came out like a broken breath. Mr. James reached into the glove compartment and slid a thick envelope backward without turning fully around. "Your father asked me to give you this when you were ready." Serena hesitated, then took it. It was heavy, real, cash, not a promise. "And this," Mr. James added, tone sharpening just slightly, "is the part you deserve to know before you make a decision." He handed her a single page, folded. Serena opened it, her eyes scanning, then freezing. It was a divorce petition. Dated, prepared, with language that made her stomach twist, the kind that erased her contribution, her sacrifices, her whole life into a convenient footnote. It positioned her as a spouse with no income, no claim, no standing. A woman to be removed cleanly once she stopped being useful. Serena stared at the page until the words blurred. Her hand stopped shaking, not because she was calm, but because something in her went still, like a switch H. Ad flipped. "He was going to do this tomorrow," she said, voice flat. Mr. James nodded once. At breakfast, and he had security ready to enforce it. For a moment, Serena didn't feel anger. She felt clarity. A brutal, clean clarity that made the last 10 years rearrange themselves into a pattern she couldn't unsee. The party wasn't a one-off. The humiliation wasn't an accident. It was rehearsal. It was training. It was control. Outside the car, 2 guards stood near the valet entrance, scanning the lot like obedient statues. The same men who'd shoved her inside moments earlier. Serena looked at them, then down at the tablet again, at her own name where Marcus's name should have been. She inhaled slowly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, not to look composed for anyone else, but because she needed to see clearly. "Mr. James," she said, her voice different now, steadier, "unlock the doors." The click sounded small, but it echoed in her chest like freedom. Mr. James didn't smile, he didn't congratulate her, he simply asked the question like it mattered. "What are your instructions, ma'am?" Serena opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The venue lights hit her face, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small under them. She looked toward the ballroom entrance where the music still pulsed and the laughter still floated out, as if her humiliation had been erased. She tightened her grip on the divorce paper, folded it once, neatly, like she was filing it in her mind. "Take me back inside," Serena said, "and call the head of security." Mr. James's voice stayed calm, but there was something like pride underneath it. "Yes, ma'am." Serena started walking toward the doors, heels steady on the pavement, the same modest dress suddenly feeling like armor instead of embarrassment. Behind the glass, the party carried on for a few more seconds, completely unaware that the woman they'd just thrown out wasn't coming back to beg. She was coming back to take her life back, in front of everyone who watched her fall. The ballroom hit Serena like heat and glitter. Music thumped, glasses clinked, and people laughed a little too loudly, the way they do when they're performing happiness for each other. For a split second, she almost expected someone to block her again, to treat her like a mistake that wandered back in. But the security at the entrance didn't move. They stepped aside without a word, as if the air itself had changed rules while she'd been in the car. Serena walked straight through the crowd, not fast, not hesitant. She could feel eyes tracking her, first confused, then curious, then hungry. The kind of attention that always came with trouble. She caught glimpses of faces she recognized from Marcus's work life, men who'd slapped his back and praised his leadership, women who'd looked Serena up and down as if deciding whether she was worth acknowledging. In the center of it all, Patricia Thorne sat in her burgundy velvet like a queen on a throne, accepting compliments with bored satisfaction. Marcus stood nearby, holding court, laughing too hard at his own joke. He spotted Serena and his smile faltered, then tightened into anger so quick it was almost funny. He strode toward her like he owned the floor under her feet. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but sharp, the same way he always did in public. "I told you to stay in the car. Do you want to humiliate me twice in one night?" Serena didn't answer him. She didn't even slow down. She walked past him like he was a coat rack. That alone cracked the room. Marcus grabbed for her elbow out of reflex, the old instinct to steer her, but a large guard stepped in between them, quiet and firm. Marcus blinked, confused, then turned to the guard with disbelief. "Move," he snapped. The guard didn't. He just looked at Marcus the way you look at someone who's missed a memo that everyone else has received. Serena kept walking. On the small stage near the head table, the microphone stand sat waiting for Patricia's next toast. Serena could hear Patricia's voice from earlier still echoing in her head, that bored cruelty wrapped in humor. Serena climbed the steps without rushing, lifted the microphone off its cradle, and turned to face the room. The music didn't stop instantly. The band kept playing for 2 beats, then one of the musicians noticed her posture, noticed her stillness, and the melody faltered into silence like a curtain dropping. A hush rolled outward in waves. People leaned forward. Phones came up. Someone actually whispered, "Oh my God," like they'd paid for this moment. Serena's hands were steady on the microphone. Her heart was pounding, but not with fear, with something like precision. "Good evening," she said, voice calm, carrying through the speakers. "I'm sorry to interrupt Mrs. Thorne's celebration." Patricia's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed with offended shock, like Serena had spilled champagne. All over her, all over again. Marcus tried to smile as he stepped closer, palms lifted in a false, easy gesture meant for the crowd. "Everyone, please," he said, laughing nervously. "My wife is overwhelmed. Serena, sweetheart, give me the mic. You're not thinking clearly." Serena didn't look at him. She looked at the room. "My name is Serena B. Hawthorne," she said, and the sound of her own name in that space felt strange, like she'd been borrowing someone else's life for 10 years. "And as of today, I am the sole owner of the Thorne Group of companies." A sharp collective inhale, then whispers erupted, quick and excited. Marcus let out a loud chuckle, too loud, the way men do when they're terrified and trying to hide it. "That's ridiculous," he said, voice pitching upward. "She doesn't even understand our corporate structure. Serena, stop this." Serena lifted her chin slightly. "This event was paid for using company funds," she continued, measured, almost clinical. "Funds that were not authorized for personal use. Effective immediately, all spending on this banquet is frozen." The color drained from Marcus's face in a rush. He moved toward the stage like he could physically pull the words back into her mouth. "Security," he barked, louder now. "Remove her, right now." No one moved. He spun, scanning for his team, for the men who always jumped when he snapped his fingers. They stood along the wall, watching him like strangers. Patricia stood up so fast her chair scraped. "You ungrateful little," she started, voice shrill. Serena spoke over her, still calm. "If you're staff tonight, I need you to listen carefully. I have cash to cover the outstanding payments that should have been made weeks ago." A murmur rippled through the servers along the edges of the room. Serena reached into the envelope Mr. James had given her and pulled out thick stacks of bills, not waving them around, just holding them like truth made physical. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted, calculating, searching for a way to frame this as a joke, a breakdown, a misunderstanding. But money has its own language, and the staff understood it immediately. Serena turned slightly and signaled to the head waiter, an older man with tired eyes who'd been avoiding the spotlight all evening. He hesitated, then stepped forward cautiously. "Sir," Serena said, keeping her voice clear enough for the room to hear, "this is for your team. You're going to count it and you're going to distribute it. Tonight." The waiter looked at the bills like he didn't trust reality. Then he took them with both hands, careful, respectful, and nodded. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it landed harder than any scream. You could feel the room recalibrate in real time as people realized something ugly. If Serena was paying the staff with cash at a luxury event, then someone hadn't been paying them at all. The waiters began to move, quietly dividing the money among themselves near the service entrance. No hiding it. No shame. A silent, efficient redistribution happening right beside crystal centerpieces and untouched dessert plates. Patricia's lips trembled. She looked at Marcus, waiting for him to fix it to restore the illusion. Marcus looked around and saw the same thing Serena saw. Guests edging away from him. People turning their bodies slightly, creating distance. Partners who'd been laughing with him 5 minutes ago now, wearing the polite, stiff expressions of people who don't want to be photographed near a sinking ship. He tried one last time to seize the room with confidence. "This is a hostile stunt," Marcus shouted, voice cracking. "She's committing fraud. You'll all be witnesses. Nobody leave. Nobody." Serena lifted the microphone again, and the room quieted because her calm was louder than his panic. "This banquet is over," she said. "I'm asking everyone to leave now." A pause, then chairs began to scrape, one table, then another. People stood, adjusting jackets, smoothing dresses, avoiding Marcus's eyes. They moved quickly but with the pretend dignity of people who don't want to look like they're running. Marcus stood in the center of the ballroom as it emptied around him. still in his perfect tux, suddenly looking like a man wearing someone else's clothes. Patricia's face hardened into rage. She took a step toward Serena, eyes blazing with the certainty that she could still intimidate her the way she always had. But before Patricia could speak, Serena leaned slightly toward the microphone one last time, her voice soft and precise. "And Marcus," she said, letting his name hang in the air, "don't worry, you'll get your divorce papers. You just won't be the one serving them." Marcus froze like he'd been slapped. Serena handed the microphone back onto its stand, turned, and walked off the stage without looking at him again. Mr. James was already waiting near the side entrance, his posture calm, his gaze watchful. As Serena passed Marcus, close. Enough to hear his breathing, she didn't insult him. She didn't gloat. She just said one sentence, low enough that only he could hear. "You locked me in a car," she murmured. "Now watch what it feels like to be locked out." And she kept walking, while behind her the last of the guests filed out, leaving Marcus and Patricia standing in the wreckage of their own performance, under chandeliers that suddenly looked cold. By morning, the glitter from the night before felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The city was still buzzing with whispers, but Serena's house was quiet. No music, no guests, just sunlight cutting across the kitchen counter, and the steady sound of Mr. James setting down a mug like this was any other day. Serena hadn't slept. She sat on the sofa in the same modest dress until the sky lightened, replaying every second. Not the humiliation, not Marcus's face. The moment the room shifted. The moment she realized she wasn't trapped. She'd been contained. Managed, like a line item, like a possession that talked too much when it wasn't trained properly. Her phone kept vibrating with unknown numbers. She ignored everyone. The only voice she needed was the one across from her. Mr. James slid a small cardboard box onto the table, the kind you use for old papers you couldn't throw away. "I pulled this from the home safe while Marcus was still at the motel," he said simply. "Your guards let me in. They know who they answer to now." Serena stared at the box like it might bite. "What is it?" "The part you never got to see," Mr. James replied. "The part he hid behind the tuxedo." Outside, at the gate, Marcus was already making a scene. She could hear him faintly through the double-glazed windows, shouting her name like it was a right he'd paid for. It would have rattled her yesterday. This morning it was just noise. Mr. James didn't even look toward the sound. Serena opened the box. The first thing she saw was a folder full of photographs. Not wedding photos, not work events, surveillance shots, her walking into the community center, her locking up after choir practice, her sitting in her car, tired, head down, unaware. Some were dated months before she even met Marcus. The air in her chest went thin. "He was watching me," she said, voice flat. Mr. James nodded, "Studying you and studying your father." Serena turned the next page and found the contract. Heavy paper, official headings, dates that made her stomach twist. The condition wasn't vague. It wasn't romantic. It was a deal. A 10-year term. Management rights, compensation, access, transfer protocols. Marriage as a countdown. Serena read it once, then again, then a third time as if the words might change. Her hands didn't shake. That was the frightening part. Something in her had gone cold and clean. "So every anniversary," she said quietly, "he wasn't celebrating, he was waiting." "Yes," Mr. James replied, "and he was planning to serve you papers the moment he thought the term had matured in his favor." Serena found the draft divorce petition behind the contract. Tomorrow morning. Asset claims, spouse receives nothing. Notes from a lawyer about keeping her uncompensated and non-contributing. It was written like she was furniture. She closed her eyes for 1 second. 10 years, 10 birthdays, 10 holidays, 10 apologies she'd swallowed. 10 years of trying to be good enough for a woman like Patricia and a man like Marcus. And it had never been about enough. It had been about ownership. From downstairs, the front door rattled. A key scraped in the lock. Serena's stomach tightened, not with fear but with irritation, like a fly had landed in her coffee. "Patricia." Serena stood up as the footsteps came up the stairs, fast and angry. The living room door flew open and Patricia Thorne appeared, hair imperfect, makeup yesterday's, rage intact. She looked around and locked onto Serena like a target. You little snake, Patricia spat. You think you can humiliate my son and walk away breathing. She raised her hand as if she'd done it before, as if Serena would flinch on cue. Serena didn't flinch. She caught Patricia's wrist mid-swing, firm and controlled. Patricia's eyes widened, more shocked by the refusal than the grip. Don't, Serena said, voice low, not once more. Serena released her hand, and Patricia stumbled back a step, clutching at her own dignity like it was slipping. Patricia's face twisted. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Marcus will fix this. He always fixes things. Serena picked up the contract and set it on the table between them like a mirror. He fixed nothing, she said. He managed appearances, that's all. Patricia glanced down, sneered, and then her sneer faltered as she read enough to recognize the shape of the truth. Her mouth tightened, but her pride fought it. So what? Men do what they have to do. Serena opened another folder from the box, one labeled with property records. Patricia's chin lifted again, trying to reclaim her throne. If you think you can take my home, you're delusional. Serena slid a mortgage agreement across the table, then another, then a notice. Patricia's eyes moved fast, scanning, trying to pretend she understood every line even as her breath started coming shallow. He used your condo as collateral, Serena said, multiple times, and he defaulted. Patricia looked up slowly, color draining. No. Serena's voice didn't rise. Yes. Patricia's lips parted like she wanted to scream, but what came out was smaller, uglier. He said it was temporary. Serena held her gaze. He says a lot of things. For one brief second, Patricia looked older than her jewelry. Then the malice surged back like a reflex. This is your fault, Patricia snapped. If you weren't so dull, so plain, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere for ambition. Serena's eyes didn't change. You want to know what's going to happen? She asked softly. You're going to pack, you're going to take your things, and you're going to stop pretending you're untouchable. Patricia's voice rose. You can't do this to me. I'm his mother. And I was his wife, Serena replied. Look where that got me. Patricia's mouth curled into something poisonous, something triumphant, as if she'd saved her best cruelty for this moment. You still don't even know the worst part, she said, almost laughing. You think you were lonely because your father didn't care. He wrote to you, every month. He never stopped. Serena's heart gave one hard thud. Patricia leaned in, enjoying it. I intercepted every letter. I kept them, and I wrote back for you. I told him you were ashamed of him. I told him not to contact you unless he sent money. The room went silent in a way that swallowed sound. Serena didn't speak. She didn't breathe for a second. Her brain tried to reject it like a body rejects poison. 10 years of thinking her father had turned away. 10 years of quiet grief she'd carried like a private shame. And it hadn't even been real. It had been manufactured. Mr. James's face darkened. His hands clenched, the first visible crack in his calm. Serena slowly looked at Patricia. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It was steady, with an edge like glass. Where are the letters? Patricia's smile flickered. A shoebox, top shelf, like trophies. Serena nodded once, as if confirming a delivery address. Go, Serena said. Go to your condo and pack. You have 24 hours. Patricia scoffed, trying to recover. Or what? You'll cry at me, you'll beg. Serena stepped closer. Or I file charges for mail theft and forgery, she said, and you'll learn what it means to have your name on an official record for the wrong reasons. Patricia's face tightened. She knew the line had shifted. She grabbed her handbag, eyes darting between Serena and Mr. James, and left without another word, the door slamming behind her like punctuation. When the house went quiet again, Serena sat down slowly, as if her bones had to remember how to hold her. My dad, she whispered, staring at the contract on the table. He thought I hated him. Mr. James placed a steady hand on the back of the chair, not touching her, just there. He never believed it, he said. He kept writing anyway. He wanted proof, for the day you'd be ready to see it. Serena swallowed hard. The ache was huge, but it didn't soften her. It sharpened her. She opened another folder. Expense reports, vendor payments, personal charges that didn't belong to a company ledger. She flipped through them faster now, searching for the ugliest parts because she knew they existed. Then she saw it. A monthly payment, large, consistent, 5 years straight. Recipient, Beaumont Center for Reproductive Health. Serena stared at the line item until the words stopped feeling like words. Beaumont was her clinic. The clinic Marcus had always said was too expensive for anything extra. The clinic where she'd sat under bright lights, smiling through appointments, believing her body was failing her. Her mouth went dry. "Mr. James," she said, voice tight but controlled, "get the car." He didn't ask why, he just moved. Because Serena wasn't chasing Marcus anymore. She was chasing the truth that had been stolen from her, one quiet payment at a time. Serena didn't raise her voice in the car. She didn't cry either. That was what scared her the most, how calm she felt while something inside her was being rewired. The city passed outside the tinted windows like background noise, traffic lights and storefronts sliding by while her mind stayed locked on one single line item: Beaumont Center for Reproductive Health. For years, that place had been her private war zone, the clean smell of disinfectant and forced optimism, the polite smiles from nurses, the careful language from doctors, and the constant implication that her body was the problem. Marcus had played the supportive husband in public and the cautious accountant in private, always reminding her they had to be sensible, that they couldn't afford more tests, more procedures, more hope. Now she was staring at proof that he'd been paying that clinic monthly like a subscription, not for her healing, but for control. When they arrived, Serena walked in like she belonged there, not as a patient begging for answers, but as someone who had paid for every lie twice. The front desk recognized her, offered the usual soft tone, the usual clipboard, but she didn't sit and she didn't wait. She asked for Dr. Marlowe directly, and when they tried to slow her down with policy and appointment rules, she set the printed statements on the counter and watched their faces shift. Money spoke louder than manners. A door opened. A hallway appeared. A staff member led her through like the building itself understood she wasn't leaving without the truth. Dr. Marlowe's office looked exactly how Serena remembered it: calm colors, framed certificates, a neat desk designed to make fear feel clinical. He was older than she remembered, or maybe he just looked smaller without Marcus's shadow behind him. The moment he saw her, his expression tightened into practiced concern, but Serena didn't give him space to perform. She placed the statements on his desk and waited. The paper didn't accuse him. It didn't need to. It just sat there, a quiet record of 5 years of payments that had nothing to do with the invoices she'd been shown. The doctor tried to hide behind confidentiality at first, tried to speak carefully about professional boundaries and patient privacy, as if she wasn't the patient, as if the person who had been swallowing pills and swallowing grief wasn't sitting right in front of him. Serena didn't threaten. She didn't shout. She simply made it clear, with steady eyes and a stillness that felt like gravity, that the era of her being managed was over. The room changed after that. The doctor's shoulders sank. His gaze dropped to the desk. His voice softened in a way that wasn't kindness, just surrender. The truth came out in pieces, and every piece landed like a stone. Serena's tests had never shown infertility. Her results had been normal. Her body hadn't been failing her. The diagnosis she'd lived under wasn't hers. The doctor had been instructed, paid, and pressured to keep her on a treatment plan that was never meant to help her conceive. The pills, the ones she took faithfully while Marcus held her and told her to stay hopeful, weren't helping her at all. They were preventing pregnancy. Years of grief, years of medical appointments, years of believing she was broken, built on a lie funded by the man who slept beside her. Serena didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She just went very quiet, the way a person goes quiet when something sacred has been stolen and the thief is standing in front of them pretending it was normal business. Her hands stayed steady as she gathered the papers. Her eyes stayed dry as she stood. The doctor's apologies followed her like background static, but apologies couldn't return the years. They couldn't return the birthdays she spent pretending she was fine. They couldn't return the nights she cried in the bathroom so Marcus wouldn't hear. They couldn't return the future that had been postponed on purpose. In the corridor outside, Mr. James was waiting. He didn't ask what happened because he could see it in her face, the way her shock had hardened into something cleaner and more dangerous. Serena walked past the waiting room, past the bright posters about hope and miracles, past the smiling receptionist, and out into the daylight without looking back. The air felt different, colder, clearer, like the world had finally stopped lying to her. By the time she sat in the car, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a verdict. Her humiliation at the party, the contract, the letters, the condo, all of it had been cruelty, but this was the core. This was the part that proved Marcus hadn't just used her. He had engineered her life. He had taken her choices and called it a marriage. He had stolen the one thing she had wanted quietly for years and had smiled through her pain while doing it. Serena looked straight ahead as the car pulled away. She didn't talk about revenge like it was an emotion. She treated it like a process. First the accounts, every card, every access point that still carried his name. Then the legal trail, every signature he forged, every loan he hid behind other people's assets, every payment that could be traced back to fraud. Then the public truth, not as a dramatic scene, but as a controlled release that would leave him nowhere to stand. And then, when he tried to crawl back through threats or charm, she would be ready for that too, because she finally understood something she'd refused to accept for 10 years. Marcus wasn't a mistake she married. He was a plan she survived. Back at the office, the building that had once felt too polished for her now fell. Tea like it had been waiting. The lobby screens still rotated corporate slogans Marcus approved, but Serena didn't slow down to look at them. She walked into the elevator, rode up, and stepped into the CEO floor like it was simply where she belonged. When the doors opened, staff who used to avert their eyes suddenly stood straighter, not out of loyalty, but out of instinct. Power always rewrites behavior. Serena didn't enjoy that. She just noted it. In her new office, she sat down, opened a clean notebook, and began listing names, accounts, documents, and dates. It wasn't rage driving her pen. It was clarity. This wasn't a marriage ending. This was a system being dismantled. She had spent years trying to be the right kind of wife for a man who never intended to be a husband. Now she was going to be the right kind of owner for a life that was finally hers. And somewhere out in the city, Marcus was still breathing, still convinced he could force the world back into the shape he preferred, unaware that the moment he tried, Serena wouldn't react like she used to. She wouldn't plead. She wouldn't panic. She would simply move. Because now she wasn't asking for respect. She was taking back everything he thought he'd safely stolen. By evening, the community center smelled like cheap coffee, hairspray, and the clean nervousness of children about to sing in front of their parents. Serena liked that smell. It reminded her of who she had been before the Thorn name turned her into a shadow, before family image became a cage. She stood at the edge of the stage with a conductor's folder in her hands, scanning the rows for the kids who always forgot their breathing marks, the ones who mouthed words when they got shy, the ones who looked for her face to know they were safe. For the first time in days, the noise in her head quieted. Music did that. It made everything else small. Mr. James sat a few rows back, not in a chauffeur's posture anymore, but in the calm, watchful way of someone who understood what kind of storm might still show up at the door. Serena didn't tell herself it would be fine. Dee stopped lying to herself. She just prepared quietly, the way you do when you've finally learned that trouble doesn't announce itself politely. The first song began, soft and clean. Parents smiled. Phones came out. The children stood straighter as their voices filled the room. Serena lifted her hand, gave a subtle cue, and the harmony steadied. For a few minutes, it felt almost normal, like the last 24 hours had been some ugly dream she could wake from. Then the back doors slammed hard enough to make the room flinch. Marcus didn't walk in. He burst in like he owned the air. He looked like a man who'd run out of mirrors and excuses at the same time. His hair was uncombed, his face raw with sleeplessness, his clothes wrong for the setting, like he'd grabbed whatever made him feel powerful and found out nothing did. The first thing he did was laugh, loud and brittle, a performance meant to reclaim a room the way he used to reclaim conversations. The children stopped singing midline. The sound died in a messy drop, and the silence that followed was worse than any scream. He strode down the aisle pointing as he went, not at Serena at first, but at the people around her, like he needed witnesses to validate his anger. He called her ungrateful. He called her unstable. He called her a thief. He said her father was a conman and she was the bait. Every insult was dressed up like truth because that was Marcus's greatest talent, turning his cruelty into something he insisted was just reality. Serena didn't step back. She didn't rush forward either. She simply stood still, letting him burn through his own oxygen. The parents began shifting, one by one, as if a single instinct had passed through them. A man in the front row stood first, broad-shouldered, hands at his sides, not aggressive, just present. Then another parent stood. Then another. It wasn't dramatic. It was protective. The kind of wall ordinary people become when someone threatens what they love. Marcus noticed it too late. His voice faltered for a fraction of a second, then rose again, sharper, trying to slice through that wall with volume. He pushed closer, eyes fixed on Serena like if he could just get close enough, she'd go back to being manageable. He lifted his hand, not to hit her, but to grab her arm the way he always did when he wanted to move her like furniture. That was the moment Serena spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She used the microphone on the stand beside her like it was a tool, not a weapon. She told him to stop, not as a request, as a boundary. Then she said something that changed the temperature of the room because it didn't come from emotion. It came from decision. She informed him in front of the very community he tried to humiliate her in that the audit was done, that the papers existed, that the doctor had confessed. The money trail was clean enough to hang him within court, and that his mother had already spoken on record. Marcus blinked fast like he was trying to reset the moment. He tried to laugh again. It came out small. He tried to bargain. That came out smaller. He tried to threaten. That didn't land at all, because threats only work when people still think you have power. Serena stepped down from the stage slowly, with the same calm she'd used at the clinic. The crowd parted for her without her asking. Mr. James was suddenly beside her, placing a thin folder into her hand like a baton being passed. Serena didn't wave it. She didn't read it out like theater. She held it where Marcus could see the signature lines, the consequences, the choice he'd backed himself into. She gave him two options. The first was the one he deserved, the one that would satisfy every instinct for justice that had been building in her since the night he shoved her into a car and locked the doors. Prison. Real charges. Real time. Not gossip and scandal, but courtrooms and records and a future he couldn't charm his way out of. The second option was a kind of punishment Marcus had never understood until that second, being forced to live like the people he'd mocked. A job, a basic wage, no title, no deference. A contract that didn't give him power, only rules. A placement far away, harsh and humiliating, the kind of posting he used to threaten employees with when he wanted them to quit without him having to say it. Marcus stared at the papers like they were written in another language. His pride fought first. You could see it in his jaw, in the twitch of his hand, in the way he tried to gather his dignity with both fists. Then fear arrived, and fear was stronger. His eyes flicked to the police officers waiting near the entrance, not for him yet, but ready. He looked at the circle of parents who didn't move, who didn't flinch, who didn't care who he used to be. He looked back at Serena, and for the first time in 10 years, he didn't see his wife. He saw his owner. His pen scratched his name onto the paper like it hurt. When he handed it back, his hand shook. Serena didn't take pleasure in that. She just took the document, folded it neatly, and gave a small nod that said the decision was made. Then she turned back to the stage as if he was already part of the past. She asked the children to breathe. She told them they were safe. She lifted her hand, and the song resumed, shaky at first, then steady, like a heart finding its rhythm again. Marcus stood there for a moment, surrounded by a room that had moved on without him, and then he backed away, step by step, until he disappeared through the same doors he'd slammed open. After that night, things didn't wrap up in a tidy ribbon because real life never does. It moved in paperwork and phone calls and quiet corrections. The company sign came down. New names went up. Accounts were frozen. Payments were made to people Marcus had stiffed while he pretended to be a king. Patricia didn't get a triumphant rescue. She got a small place, far from the center of attention, and the humiliation of knowing her comfort depended on the woman she used to mock. Mr. James became more than a driver. He became the person who made sure Serena never had to be trapped in silence again. And Serena did something for herself that wasn't about revenge at all. She hired a new doctor. She demanded full records. She got the real truth about her health, and she felt something like grief and hope collide in her chest when she learned her body hadn't failed her. It had been sabotaged. The difference mattered because one is fate and the other is a crime. Weeks later, on a cold morning, Serena sat in the back seat of the same black sedan Marcus once used as a symbol of power. The city looked ordinary again, traffic crawling, winter light dull on the pavement. At a red light, Mr. James nodded slightly toward the right. Serena followed his gaze. A man in a bright municipal vest was chipping ice off a curb with a heavy iron bar. His shoulders were hunched against the cold. His hands moved with slow, repetitive effort. His face was wind-burned, exhausted, and strangely blank, like the part of him that used to perform had run out of fuel. It was Marcus. Not in a suit, not surrounded by people trying to impress him, not protected by his mother's reputation or his wife's silence. Just a man doing work he once called beneath him. He looked up briefly, sensing the car. For a second, his eyes searched the tinted glass, trying to find her, trying to reach back into a life that was gone. Serena watched him without hatred and without pity. The feeling that surprised her most was how little she felt at all. He didn't own space in her heart anymore. He didn't even own a scar that still hurt. He was simply evidence of what happens when someone builds their entire life on control and lies. The light turned green. Mr. James asked if she want Dee to stop. Serena shook her head once. No drama, no last word, no victory speech. She just said quietly that they had rehearsal that evening. Then she looked ahead, not back, because her life finally belonged in the direction she was moving. And that was the real ending. Not the downfall of Marcus Thorne. The return of Serena Hawthorne.